Welcome back. You're watching Daybreak on Citizen Television. Thank you for staying with us here on the broadcast. Your time is all appreciated. Your company is therefore worthy. With me in the studio is the Secretary General of the Kenya National Union of Teachers, Collins Oyuu. Thanks for your time, as well as his predecessor, Wilson Sossion, who was at the helm of that organization, and the National Vice Chairperson of the University's Academic Staff Union, Cyprian Ombati, who is with us in the studio, as we take stock of the education in the country and, by extension, reforms that are needed at the university level and also throughout the education sector in the country. Collins, what we are talking about here, and perhaps might have precipitated the move by the CS to make this statement, is the 2016 scrapping of what Mwalimu Wilson Sossion cites as the latter subsidized, the model which collapsed in 2016 as the number of qualifying students in the KCSE examination fell drastically and the market for self-sponsored students evaporated overnight. This is at the heart of the financial crisis that engulfed public universities in the country. But then going forward, we have a dipping funding, or which is dropping for that matter, vis-a-vis high enrollment. Where is the balance here? Even as unions decry lack of funding for public universities to support institutions that are, even by extension, according to the IMF, which is the financial arm of the World Bank, are not doing well. So where is the balance here? Because there needs to be a solution going forward.
I think we just come back to what we are trying to propose about income-generating activities at the universities. The drop on self-sponsored students way back really interfered with generating income for the universities. I want to take an example of teaching. Teachers drastically dropped their quest for further education by sponsoring themselves in universities, because ultimately there was, nothing to come by in terms of promotions. It is at this time that we are fighting for those who really toiled, took their resources to get further education, be considered. And it's true, there was a presentation of a petition in Parliament, which actually we are making a follow-up to. And this will actually increase the quest of these teachers to sponsor themselves for further education. In this way, we shall actually get more funds to the universities. But if the position is that these degrees are not recognized, I think it will fall much low in terms of generating income. Then two, I think when research is properly funded, definitely we shall actually acquire a lot in terms of resources for universities. What actually fell in 2016, as you've actually said, is very evident. And I'm explaining about my self-sponsored students who are teachers in the universities. This has actually really and totally collapsed.
Okay, but Katibu, what then do you need? Have you established the cause of that discontinuity of teachers who opt for self-sponsorship? What are the reasons?
Yes, what caused the discontinuity was basically in Teachers Service Commission. By 2014 February, Teachers Service Commission refused literally to recognize some of these degrees. So you go in, study, get your degree, but nobody talks about it. So we are saying that if these degrees are recognized, there will be a push for our teachers to go into self-sponsored, learning in universities. Yes.
And is it upon the establishment for the Teacher Service Commission to disown the degrees you have talked about, and they issued by recognized universities? In
fact, when degrees are issued by recognized universities, Teacher Service Commission has no local standee to disqualify or maybe talk about the degrees. That is not within their mandate. And we are saying, let them stop what is not within their mandate and actually have interest in what is within their mandate. So we complained. This thing was actually forwarded to the Education Committee in Parliament, and we have recommendations to stop TSC from doing this.
All right.
What is going to happen is actualizing the recommendations, which, of course, we are following up.
Okay. And this, Cyprian, I'll come to you, and Mwalimu Sosion, just one final question. Then this brings to the focus, or under the limelight, the Commission on University Education. Established in 1995, initially focused on accreditation of private universities. The mandate expanded in 2013 to cover public universities. In 2016, the Commission cancelled 5 doctoral degrees awarded by Kisii University. The reason they cited, that the Commission on University Education established that the 5 students had only studied for 6 months each before receiving their doctorates. Even as you advocate for the teachers and the degree programs that they have gotten from universities, do you also scrutinize the authenticity of that qualification?
Yes, we should. We should scrutinize. For it's total ignorance to proceed to university when you don't have qualifications. And you know, some universities are out for business. Mm-hmm. When you say that some were disqualified based on the qualifications, as a person, as a teacher, I know too well what I've qualified for. Mm-hmm. But somebody can have me turn around to say that I have qualified, yet I have not qualified. So basically, teachers know exactly what they've qualified for. So we cannot cheat ourselves and say, I have not qualified and let me proceed. That is very dangerous. It happened, I want to agree, but we really cautioned, and we continued cautioning our teachers, don't proceed to what will not actually qualify you at the end of it all.
Okay. Cyprian, I'll come to you. Mwalimu Sosion, looking at the Parliamentary Budget Office, in its estimates, it said in the next 5 years, the Kenya Kwanza administration might need more than 600 billion Kenya shillings. Your successor talks about the lack of absorption of these teachers and the problem that they often face, and teachers do face, from the Teacher Service Commission, according to him. Where is the problem, despite an allocation of $500 billion Kenya shillings, that is more than 500 billion Kenya shillings? Is it about the management of the resources to absorb the workforce? Where is the problem?
It's lack of commitment. If all these matters we are talking about education and the programs in education is about commitment to put funding where it is necessary. For example, we talk about teachers, that is being alluded to. Continuing education is a global agenda that has been passed by UN for everyone, including workers, including you, Abdikadir. You can proceed for any studies, and your employer should allow you and promote you appropriately at the end of it. That is the current provision world over, from the EFA goals of 2000 to 2015 to the SDG that we have now. Continuing education is a fundamental right. And Kenyan teachers have put in their money to undertake further studies, and have been graduated. What you are talking about is completely different, where somebody acquires a PhD in 6 months. That is wrong. There are minimum timelines. But those who have been properly graduated and certificated by the universities in different fields, including teachers, deserve to be recognized and promoted. And what we are talking about is discontinuation of that policy by TSC, which is still contestable. It's within the rights of teachers to be recognized and paid for. But in terms of funding by the state, we must expand the sources of revenue collection. As you have seen, the focus of Kenya Kwanza, as it was with Kibaki's government, is to streamline revenue and tax collection measures in this country. Because we are collecting 2.1 trillion as a country, and 1.4 trillion goes to repayment of debts, and 600 billion goes to payment of salaries. And that is it. And that is not how to run this country. It's sheer madness to expect money from nowhere to come in and finance everything in the economy. Expansion of and stringent measures of tax collection will see this country within a short time collecting 3 trillion, and Kenya Kwanza projects that in 2 years it can be able to collect 5 trillion. And all that will be appropriated to different areas, including education. And we should not put a lot of focus that all the revenue that is collected will absolutely finance everything in education. There are fundamental areas that government must finance fully, like the free basic education, that has to be done, and TVET financing, it has to be done. Universities, it has to be done. But we are talking about quality outcomes in universities and prudent management. That is, there is no choice about it. Universities, because we are discussing universities today, and I think that's the key item, and it's going to be a product. It's a major item of discussion at the Presidential Working Party, and submissions have been given. There must be a turnaround in way of management of universities. And when you talk of, and I think, Abdikadir, we should know where the problem started. Why did the ministry at that time, and it's all about leadership and the philosophy of leadership, why did the ministry at that time in 2016 refuse to listen and stifle transition to universities? Now universities have collapsed. That is where the rain started beating us. Because
is it because of the admissions as a result?
Yes, because look at it. In 2015, there were 265 students out of 500,000 who scored C+ and above, because exams were properly moderated. Yes, I agree, there were examinations cheating. All we needed was to stamp out examination cheating. But moderate exams properly, we must have a normal curve in exams. Those with C+ and above should be a significant number, so that we have a reasonable transition. And I agree with the report of the World Bank. Okay. The World Bank are telling us that the universities are collapsing because one major artery of resources to universities, continuing education, was stifled and collapsed. That is what needed to be corrected.
Thank you.
It should have been corrected like yesterday.
Let me come.
And this is what Machogu has corrected.
Okay, thank you.
And now we have 173 students, 1,000. And that is 19%. 19% of a candidature of 800,000 is a small number. And if we are talking about education for all and transition, if we are talking about 100% transition from primary to secondary.
Thank you.
We should actualize 100% transition from Form 4 to tertiary institutions.
Thank you.
And in that way, we will not be here to discuss the financial challenges. We'll be discussing about quality and outcomes.
Thank you. Because that quality is premised upon the high enrollment versus low funding as a result of that 26.
And you cannot talk about quality before you open access.
I'll follow up on that question because I need to take the account of Cyprian as well, who is with us in studio. And Cyprian, I'm taking a look at also this report by the World Bank, which focused on public universities in the country. The report, which largely also covered the other universities in the continent, cited that the University of Cape Town, Africa's leading university, has an endowment of 11.8 billion rands, equivalent to $786.5 million US, which would not even put it in the top 100 universities in the United States of America. Now, for example, established universities in the country, University of Nairobi, Kenyatta University, Moi, are no way near when you talk about the financial muscle of these institutions. And I wonder, because what you are protesting against has been a common problem even in the past regimes. For example, talking about poorly trained academic staff, inadequate libraries and research centers, and overcrowded classrooms. So how then do you unlock this problem, having identified it as a problem? So going forward, what will be the solution?
It's okay. Yes, I like that bit of the World Bank report. You know, sometimes it's because we just take a report, since it is coming from World Bank, thinking that now it has all the solutions for us. Sometimes solutions are domesticated, because that's what we do at the university.
Just identification of the problem, not the solution per se.
So the problem that we are having, in order for us to have our universities moving to that level of universities outside Kenya, as I've said before, one, the government must do their part. We have talked here of students' numbers, that because students' numbers went down, that is why universities are having this problem. But that is not the major part. Because I can tell you, before 2016, universities never had problems of funding, even from the government. the so-called Kibaki regime, they were funding properly. What now happened is, as time was going, the funding from government was coming down day by day. Now we are at about 40%. If we take that one to about 80 or 90%, almost half of the problems will be gone. If you want universities to have such amounts of funds like what you have mentioned of South African universities, then we need our staff to be able to engage in high caliber research, whereby they are able to attract funding from outside. But they can only do that if, these staff are properly paid, if these staff, their welfare is taken care of. For example, let us talk of Egerton University. Everybody knows here that Egerton is a research-based university. It conducts that research and brings it out here. But today, what's happening to the staff? The staff there are miserable.
And closure of campuses.
Yes. Because of that, you cannot be able now to tell those staff that we need you to sit down, think, and then come up with solutions. Because our only way of bringing money to university is through research. And for those lecturers to do that, then they must have their bills paid. But when the university is not paying you a loan, somebody is knocking on your door, how do you expect me to sit down and come up with a proper research so that now I attract funds to our universities? What we are simply saying is that this thing, the government cannot run away from their part. Even if today they increase the number of students, those students again are going to private universities.
Okay.
So they have not solved the problem. What we are asking the government to do is, can the government sit down and return back the funding of universities to about 100%, because those are state agencies like others. If they do that, I can assure you, you'll be able to see that now universities will generate amounts on their own because they'll have motivated staff.
Okay.
Right now, we are government workers like others, but I can tell you, we are struggling with our CBS. We are struggling with our salaries. We are earning salaries which we are supposed to be new salaries like other workers, but we are earning salaries that was about 7 years ago. How can a demotivated staff now bring funds to universities?
Okay.
World Bank report is okay, but we want to ask World Bank, let us be realistic with the problems we have here. But if you borrow from South Africa, they not work in Kenya.
Okay, just an identification of the problem. Katibu, or you, because I'm looking at the move which led to high enrollment versus low funding. Take, for example, the mathematical fraction of the numerator and the denominator. What will be the likely outcome here? Because if you have high enrollment, then slash low funding, there definitely are going to be outcomes. How are these outcomes going to look like?
Definitely, they cannot be good outcomes. When there's high enrollment and low funding, just look at it, they cannot balance. I think what we are discussing here can be, answered very well when we look at where rain started beating us. We are actually struggling to address an issue that we can have answers to very fast. Talk of 2016. My brother, vice chairman, was to say all was well before 2016. What happened? We have identified where the problem is in. How it came to, now the government now doing 40%. They are saying, can it be more than 40%? He's talking about the way lecturers in universities have themselves placed. They are suffering. They have loans. They cannot pay the loans, meaning that they cannot be paid as required. This should be addressed. And finally, when the universities can actually generate funds through research, how do we get into quality research to generate more income to the universities? I think, Ayub, what we are addressing, we have answers to.
Okay.
Can we go back to 2016 and beyond 2016?
Calling for a review.
Let us call for a review, a dialogue on the same. We get to what is happening. Now, my brother Sosion here says, this is a different scenario from the former government. Yes, and if that is the case, can we focus on what was happening before 2016? Let us wake up to the call, dialogue on the same, and give straight answers to these issues. Without, the report of the World Bank being tabled to us, we have those solutions, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Before I take the account of the former NAT Secretary General and as well former nominated MP Wilson Sosion, let's sample some of your feedback on Twitter. This is what you are saying, the hashtag. Daybreak, the SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdikadir. Quest Gentleman says it's not always the children of the rich who lead researchers that are useful to the country. A good government will always endeavor to identify and tap the best, rare and abstract gifts in its people. Raime Butia says privatization often involves the systematic elimination of human rights, protections, and further marginalization of the interest of low-income earners and those living in poverty. Government should rather enhance structural adjustment policies. Bob Otieno Owino says privatization of higher education is a wrong move and bad intention, as it will get out of hands to many poor Kenyans, whom majority are hustlers. Babu Michel says privatization of public institutions in this country will change their main objectives and vision, making them to only concentrate on profit-making goals and lock out the financially vulnerable general public. And Engineer Lazaro says privatized higher education will make education unaffordable to almost 3/4 of the populations. To bring down a nation doesn't require big machines. Just interfere with the education and everything will be in a total mess. The last one from Gode Barasawere says privatization of education, especially university education, will deny students from poor background a chance to pursue studies. This will, in the end, affect the quality of professionals because those from poor backgrounds take education seriously. Well, we'll continue to sample your feedback. The hashtag on Twitter is Daybreak, and we thank you for keeping us company here on the broadcast. Mwalimu, I've asked a array of feedback there. Before you respond to what they have said in terms of also the accessibility to Higher Education Loans Board, it's what's largely captured, the privilege in terms of those who access, and that has been a concern also raised by the government reports. However, earlier on, we had talked about the move in 2016, before we also talk about, by extension, the Education Working Party on education reforms that is seeking to revamp the education system from the bottom. But talk to me about the lack of academic staff, many lecturers who are not qualified properly, no decent teaching or learning facilities to access to innovative technology. I mean, does this then place us at a point of inferior academic?
I think talking about those variables, lack of qualified academic staff, poor pay and whatnot, is the whole issue of quality. Are we as a country determined to mount quality university teaching and even quality education outcomes in our education system? Why we are addressing the mistakes of the past, we do not want to talk about mistakes of the past without drawing a proper roadmap that will give us good results in the short term. And we are not cooking these activities within Kenya. We are linking all these with the global standards. If you look at SDG, towards equitable, quality, and lifelong education for all, that is the overarching goal, SDG 4 of the UN or UNESCO. There are 3 areas that every country must invest in, and Kenya will have to invest in. What we call quality infrastructure in all our learning institutions, whether it's basic, whether it is it's primary, secondary, whether it's TVET, whether it's universities. That is a prerequisite. It's an area that government must invest in. Teacher investment is an area. It's called a means. It's what all countries must do. And you can see, Kenya Kwanza government, we are trying to recruit more teachers for basic education while focusing on university education. If you look at the charter of Kenya Kwanza, it addresses itself to the number of personnel in our training institutions, whether it's TVET or universities, both in terms of qualifications, in terms of capacity. And if you look at the charter, we talk about motivating and respecting their labor rights. It is there. And I'm happy. I'm one of those who participated in drafting it. Okay. And I think we captured what really unions would consider as important. And I think what unions should be doing is to draw a matrix and see which one is being implemented and which one is not. You have a very easy time with this government that has focused and has addressed most of these issues. The other bit is the issue of funding and expanding the number of scholarships. If you look at it now at the basic education, you can see Equity Bank, KCB, and many other sponsors coming in to sponsor students. There is need for us to achieve all this. There is need because education is about funding. It's all about funding. It boils down to funding. Okay. Where do we get funding? How do we sponsor all students in the households to ensure that they access education without creating barriers as to cost? The issue of privatization that has been brought about, it does not exist. And this one, we don't need to bother. Now, if we focus on the universities, for example, and let us be specific, what are the sources of funding of the universities? Government capitation. Where government in the past has not fully, because the data we have is that the previous regime paid 52% to universities instead of 80%. This has to be revised so that government is able to remit the full capitation that it is obligated.
Okay, so
that is one. Two.
Before you proceed to item number 2, you have talked about the capitation 52% instead of 80. So we need 28 more to meet that.
It is, and that is why.
Just hang on.
Yes.
Then will that 28% be achievable under the current administration?
Under the current administration, because we are not talking from the blues. We did careful studies. We did careful consultation and look at how to expand funding to universities. And based on students being sponsored, number one, the Higher Education Loan Board is one source of lifeline to students. That is now at 13%, must be doubled to 26%. You know, doubling to that extent really gives students a lot of relief. They are able to finance themselves. And then, two, the university's funding board has got to be lumped with all these other finances so that then we have a centralized and more orderly way of financing universities. But now, before we implement all this, and all these matters are under discussion at the Presidential Working Party. And there is a unique subcommittee dealing with university education. And it's an open forum that there are many vice chancellors inside. The differentiated unit course and all the models are being examined. Okay. But then what you are talking about now, the problem that the unions have and which universities have, and which is a problem of this country. And in fact, we all agreed in Kenya Kwanza that the biggest problem was not even in the basic. Okay. The biggest problem is in the universities.
Thank you.
Why do we have 66 billion pending bills in the universities? Before this is bailed out, we must know what caused it, how do we remedy it?
Thank you.
And if government is going to decide to bail out universities with 66B, it has to be a decision connected with other conditions.
Thank you. Okay.
Because from here, Abdikadir, from here, the universities must deliver in terms of management and in terms of outcomes and in terms of quality, and we should not have staff who are not well paid, their terms, their deductions are not remitted for their benefits. The issues to do with financial challenges should be a thing of the past.
Thank you, Katibu. Let me go to Oyu, because you talked about help, and this is a major area of focus for the Presidential Working Party on education, that amongst other issues had released its first preliminary report on the domiciling of junior secondary school learners within their present schools. But do you foresee, predictably, Katibu, a better targeting system by the Higher Education Loans Board? Because the concern is that the access to this funding, and in terms of its loan recovery processes, it isn't adequate, it isn't sufficient. Do you foresee a very conclusive report on how we can better restructure help for students who are needy and from vulnerable households to access?
Now, I think the Presidential Working Party is still working on so many things, including the issues of health. What we need to hammer on is, an open discussion where our suggestions to the same also reach the Presidential Working Party. Because right in there, they could be making their own discussion, and outside here, the experience is there. Just for example, about the domiciling of junior secondary in primary schools. If we just left it to their own discussion, wherever they are, I think we would have missed it. Mm-hmm. The end result of having this junior secondary domiciled in primary schools came as a result of, that consultative approach. They came out, they demanded to know, right from the 110 branches of Kenya National Union of Teachers, what is the position? So what I want to maintain here is a serious dialogue, a serious discussion, so that we balance what we end up with as an end result. Mm-hmm. Yes. So even as we talk of help funding, yes, practically, when there's a total delay in funding, the need for the funding is really reduced. When should this funding come? When it's come needy, let it be there. We have students who go out here saying, we were expecting funding. We've not gotten it. So what happens between the time that is actually delayed? It means that the effect of the funding is not realized at all. So what I want to propose here, even as we talk about funding from HELB, let it be very timely. Let it be timely to the extent that it assists the very needy students for the funding.
Okay, and yes. Cyprian, is it also an issue that you highlight because there isn't an operation in a vacuum, even as you oppose the planned privatization, seeking more funding from the government in terms of student per capita, seeking a review of the 2016 policy by then Education CS, and talking about the notably tracing done by the loan beneficiaries through employers and statutory bodies, including the Kenya Revenue Authority, the National Hospital Insurance Fund, NHIF, the National Social Security Fund, NSSF. How will the fund body be then further strengthened? Because here the focus is on loan repayment scheme, but the access, according to a recent report, says that students from privileged households or backgrounds access more than those who are needy and bright, yet they have no access to high learning education.
Yeah, that is true. That is the picture we have at the universities, whereby you find that loans, bursaries are benefiting students sometimes who don't deserve it. You find these are students who comes from a well-to-do family, yet he's the one who is getting funds. Those who comes from poorer homes, they are not able to access these funds. And that's why we want sincerity in these things, even including the funding we are talking about. If the government is very sincere, the body that they want to come up with, we don't have a problem with it, as long as it will solve the problem. But if we are going to have, again, the same song being done, then we not solve this problem. We are asking this body that if funds have been allocated, because we also have another problem whereby funds are allocated to the ministry, but they don't get to the universities as where they are supposed to get. We want a body that will be able to look at the funding of universities, how the money will trickle down to each and every university so that it can be able to accomplish the task that it is meant to do. Even the amounts for help are able to reach the poorer and the needy cases at the university. If that is done, then you'll be able to find that the problems with the students in our universities will be gone. If I come back to the issue of funding, I want to say that for those policymakers who may be watching us, yes, there's a presidential working party, but I want to tell them that if they will not solve how we can fund public universities, and they want either to think of how universities can be privatized to generate income, then we have lost it. You read here one of the viewers has just said that the only way to destroy a country is to destroy the education system. And if you destroy the higher education system, that is it. Because this is where now those poorer students at the university access their education so that they can be doctors, engineers, lawyers, journalists, etc. We are asking, as the University Academic Staff Union, let us relook and give serious attention to universities. The late C.S. Magoha mentioned this, that I did not give enough time to universities. out of my time allocation, I gave only 15%. I can tell you, if the government increases the attention to universities, yes, I can tell you that they have, again, now taken much more time to TVET again, ignoring the higher education sector, specifically universities.
But that also informs, isn't it? Because we are talking about, as I earlier mentioned, Cyprian, the need for a well-choreographed education system, because one informs the other. It's the basic foundation which informs the primary informs the secondary, then you have the TVETs or otherwise high learning institutions like the universities and colleges.
Yes.
I mean, you can't do without the other, without that chain, isn't
Exactly.
it? I mean, so, and the investment as well in the TVET sector will be disastrous,
Yes,
you agree with me?
we agree. TVET should be there. It should be relooked at. But now, again, if you look, you are a journalist, go and do your research. You'll find, again, they are now overemphasizing TVETs at the expense of universities. Why do you kill universities? Because we'll need the lawyers, we'll need the engineers, we'll need the doctors, in as much as we need the artisans, the plumbers, and those technicians from TVET. So there should be a balance. But again, if the government overemphasizes TVET and misses out on universities, we are going to lose it. I can tell you for sure. In Kenya, go to any home. Even if you take a student to TVET, the dream of every parent is that I want my child to go to university at the end of the day. I want this artisan, a plumber, at the end of the day to upgrade and become an engineer, even if it takes 10, 15 years. So, because they are interconnected, the government should give still serious attention to universities.
Thank you.
The only way, the government must fund higher education, specifically university sector, for us to go to prosperity.
Yes, Mwalim.
I think I'll ask the unions here, because it's also good you understand everything that the government is doing and that which is planning. And these are different government. And the master plan on universities and higher education is one of the best. Looks like there is a mismatch in some bit of understanding. You ought to understand. And probably the unions, you need a retreat. And we bring you facilitators so that we discuss the details, what is contained in the charter and the roadmap, and actually what is happening now. If you understand this, you will be able to help and critique constructively. And if I get back to the master plan in looking at the universities, and I want to correct, there is no overemphasis of TVET at the expense of universities. All sectors are equal, and they'll be treated the same. And transition to universities and support to universities will be maintained as desired. And the objective here is to have universities back working and running, get the universities out of the financial mess, get the lecturers back to class, get the lecturers doing research, carrying out quality research. We are not going to run bottom-up at the counties if the universities are not linked properly with the economic activities at the grassroots. And we are trying to continue what Kibaki did. Kibaki started with free education for primary. Then he moved to affordable education for secondary. And then established universities in every county so that citizens can move, can transit huge number. If you go to the US, 60 to 66% is the transition to universities by students. And that is what we are trying to get back here in Kenya. Ayub, yes, the most important thing that which the universities have not picked it, is that we are looking at, the Kenya Kwanza is looking at implementing the Open University of Kenya. That is going to allow every citizen, wherever you are, you can enroll in the university. And this is more or less online program. And this is going to be another artery that is going to make universities work, that is going to keep, in fact, the lecturers we have might not be enough.
Okay.
We need to make Kenya a destination of service industry in terms of education. If we have an open university here in Kenya, Tanzanians will come in, Ugandans, Ethiopians and the rest, and those in the region. Kenya must be a leader in terms of accessibility of quality university education. And it's now time to fix the problem.
Okay, thank you.
And as those problems are fixed, we want the unions
to
be part of it. And that is why begin with understanding the charter.
Thank you.
Reading it face value the way it is not enough.
Thank you.
Because there are many issues, like the open university. It can be a whole world of information and data that needs to be looked at. And it has to be done here in Kenya so that university education can be accessible, of good quality, competitive, and it should be linked to the economy of the country.
Thank you.
The programs of the country. So
about...
I think we've got a very good plan.
Thank you.
The only thing is you are absent. If you come in and if you need a sitting for the whole day, I think that there are enough resource persons you can engage. And that is why what is going on at the task force, at the subcommittee of universities, is not mere talk show. It is thinking through these issues and finding the best solutions. And this government is very open, and the president is very keen in all this. And we are not beginning to begin negotiating and planning. We did it at the charter. We had a master plan. It is there. We are purely implementing.
Thank you. And talking about the open policy, the person you touted, the late President Emilio Stanley Mwai Kibaki, is a graduate of Makerere in Uganda, and who is touted as the initiator of the free primary education after taking power.
And the London School of Economics.
Of course, that was afterwards. Katibu.
Yes.
Looking at the holistic picture of education, because one informs the other. Cyprian talked about TVET and the need for investment of attention on all the subsegments within the education framework, as also pointed out by Wilson Sosion, is critically very key. But then going forward, because this is a subject that will be with us, and I say so because Kenya is a country that is enormously dependent on its human resource in terms of getting revenues. That's why, for instance, what informs President William Ruto's focus on the diaspora, which he says is the Kenyan workforce outside the country that gets back to the country in terms of resources. How can we better the curriculum, the class learning at the basic? How can we better the campus learning at the universities, TVETs there? How can we learn at the community experience, giving back to the community? And largely, in terms of commerce, how can that skills and mindset be practicalized in terms of employability?
Thank you. I want to say that the Education Charter of Kenya Kwanza indeed is very rich. What we are missing, and what Wilson is referring to as being absent, is the fact that we did not actually participate in the charter build-up.
Because he was in another political formation.
So he was there, and we were not there. So right now, he cannot say that we are absent. We really need it because this is a government that we must all support.
Yes.
With all, matters education as was proposed in the Education Charter for Kenya Kwanza, which I want to repeat is very rich. Now, when you talk about the committees, Wilson, addressing different sectors, maybe the university, TVETs, and so on, and basic education, I think they cannot just close themselves in, a room and say, we are doing this as a committee. They must also get the views of those concerned.
And they collected the views.
No. It's still on. Yeah. It's still on.
And it is open.
So they have not come to the end of the conclusion of the work that they were doing.
And you can still submit now.
Yeah, I can still submit. But that openness, this is where we are. We are stuck. Now, what do? It needs consultation. Basic education, we are there. University education, they are there. Now, your question, Ayub, about generally what should be done and a focus on proper education and for all of us to be, quality education for our children, is that, one, we must continue dialoguing on matters education every other time. And the government input in education, let it be as said. Let it be as said. I've told you that the Kenya Kwanza Education Charter is very rich. Let us actually stick to what is in the charter and maintain what is in the charter and actually actualize what is in the charter. What has actually failed us in this country is talking much of what to do and doing less of what should be done. Now, proposals of what should be done to have education as a sector improve are always wished away and just thrown under the carpet. If Kenya Kwanza government, which of course we all belong to, and especially on matters of education, let us actualize exactly what they intended the charter to be for. For example, when we sat on Tuesday about the research findings on privatization, which of course my brother Wilson is saying is not there. To me, it is there. Let him go deep into what is happening and get to know that commercialization is there. You see what boarding schools are charging. It's as if it is basically a market to mint money from parents. When we get into what we rolled out from the research findings and we placed before the Ministry of Education, it's right there. Let us actually get into the findings and very deep. Education shall be better than what it is now, right from basic to higher education.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Quality service. Yes, briefly, final comments before I get the tweets and then we wrap things up.
I want to finish by saying that one word to those who are the implementers of our policies. Do not think of privatizing university education. We will get it wrong. Secondly, we cannot run away from funding. Let us fund our higher institution of learning, universities, specifically here, so that now they can be able to deliver their mandate. What we have as of now, I can tell you, we cannot go anywhere as long as universities are not funded. If you see what is happening in universities now, lecturers are going to class whereby they don't even have marker pens or materials for teaching.
Thank you.
Yet this is a public university. Can we fund our public universities just like any other organization of the university so that they can deliver on their mandate? Yes. If that is done, to me, I can tell you there will be no problem.
Thank you. 30 seconds?
The universities will have to be run better, particularly public universities, and never, and that is what Colin should understand, and everyone. Government does not intend to privatize universities. It is not going to happen, nor even any public institution.
Thank you.
All public institutions shall remain public and funded by government, but the education system will be turned around.
Thank you.
And I urge all, let us develop a proper matrix and take advantage of the commitment of government to turn around education, and we work together and deliver equitable quality education for all Kenyans.
Thank you. Let's now take a look at the final tweets here on the broadcast that you have sent us here in the course of this program. And here's what you are saying on Twitter. The hashtag is Daybreak. We have Esau who says privatization of education is a double-edged sword. While it offers more options for students, let's also put, he says, financial strain on families from poor backgrounds. The lack of affordable education limits equal opportunities and perpetuates the cycle of poverty. Hilary Barsulai says universities are dying, ! A number of these universities are planning to introduce TVET courses and are currently benchmarking with TVET institutions. What will happen to undergraduate and undergraduate programs? Babu Michel says, I see privatization of public educational institutions as one way of the government running away from their main responsibilities. If this happens, the financially vulnerable students will really suffer in this country. It's not right, he says. Thank you for your time and company. Wilson Sosion is the former Kenya National Union of Teachers Secretary General. We also had his successor in studio, Collins Oyu, who is now leading the agency. Thank you for your time and company. And as well, the National Vice Chairperson of the University's Academic Staff Union, Cyprian Ombati, who was with us here as they all gave us their accounts, in effect, to education in the country and how to better the education system amid calls of privatization and vehement opposition by the unions whose representatives are here this morning. And thank you to you too for watching the broadcast and waking up with us here on Daybreak. Your company is worthy and appreciated. And we'll see you next Wednesday by the grace of God here on Daybreak. Thanks for watching. Good morning.